welcome to another True Review. Today I'm bringing you Valhalla Hills Definitive Edition on the Xbox One. It's coming out on the 28th of April 2017 and is priced at a very scary $29.99 in the UK. I have no pricing for other regions yet, but I imagine it will be the same kind of upper mid-range price, which is a very scary price point for a title, because they don't usually fare very well when they're priced at this price point. So does Valhalla Hills buck the trend? Let's find out, shall we? So what is it? It's a god game. You play as a god who's been banished from the halls of Valhalla by Odin because he doesn't participate in the usual things Vikings enjoy, such as hunting, drinking, and hunting, killing beasts, etc. He likes building things. Hence the crux of the game, where you have to manage a group of Vikings, build communities, build up their resources so they have enough materials and enough military might to climb the hill to Valhalla, where they open the portal which they need to go through to transcend to the next map, which you then do the same again. Problem being, you open the portal, you introduce denizens or enemies into the world, which either need to be defeated through your military or appeased by giving them sacrifices at altars and things such as that. So there's a different ways you can actually tackle it. We're getting a little bit ahead of myself at the moment, because actually getting up the hill to where the portal is located is a very tricky process to do, because the game doesn't help you at all. And now I'm all for complaining about games being too, holding your hand too much, but a game such as this needs to explain itself how you actually play it, and the tutorials that are provided in game are very poor. You get a very brief introduction to the game where you get told, build a toolmaker, build a woodcutter, build this, build that. It doesn't explain to you why you're doing it, it's just telling you to build it. So you build those, and then for some reason the buildings aren't being built. For some reason the woodcutter's cutting down trees with his bare hands, even though you've made axes at your toolmaker, and there's no explanation why he's not getting an axe or being provided with an axe, even though your toolmaker's just made 10 of them. Workers are not going into the houses, or Vikings are not going to the houses, even though you've put them down right next to them. It says you've got a house there and it's completely empty. Why aren't they going in there? The game doesn't explain any of this to you whatsoever, and I actually found myself going to external sources to actually learn how to play the game, such as community forums and such. And apparently how it works is each of the buildings has a catchment area which you don't get to see until you put it down. You're kind of like when you say you put a woodcutter down, it will show you the area where he will cut wood, but it doesn't show you the area that he will operate in, such as the toolmaker, for example, has to be within a certain vicinity of the woodcutter, otherwise the woodcutter won't go to him to get an axe. The buildings have to be in certain vicinity of the fishery, otherwise they won't go and get food. And most confusingly, the buildings, even though the buildings will only actually house employed Vikings who are in the catchment area. If the unemployed Vikings are in the catchment area, the unemployed Vikings won't actually go live in a house, they'll just go sleep under the tree, which is pure madness. But the game doesn't explain any of this to you whatsoever, and it just very confusing experience. But once you've the biggest bugbear of all as well, this catchment area is invisible as such. It's not really evident of what this catchment area is. You can expand the catchment area by connecting your buildings together with roads, but even then you still don't know the sphere of influence of every building that's available to you, which is extremely bad in my opinion, because it's quite an important part of the game, so you know how to effectively construct a community, because you could be building buildings which are outside the sphere of influence of the other buildings, and none of them will collect resources from any of the buildings, which basically means you've got an ineffective community, inefficient city. It's just a little bit silly. I just can't get my head around why they've actually done this. But once you kind of grasp that understanding, and the only way I found to really counteract is if you build your buildings pretty much nearby, very nearby to one another, which makes obviously expanding a lot slower. once you figure that out, you actually can make some decent progression by equipping your army with the necessary equipment for them to open the portal finally. And when you do, enemies flood out, you move your army, who's the only guys you have actually direct control over. Otherwise the other artisans and Vikings that you employ around your village will just do their task, but do their task under the AI's control. But the military, you have kind of direct control, and you can move them into the enemy, and then you just simply watch the hit points fly up and down, and hopefully you win. If you win, you can go through the portal, transcend to the next map, where you start again basically from scratch, but your Vikings have earned honor. They earn so much honor, and then they eventually, you know, transcend and go to Valhalla, and that's a successful win of the game basically. But the game doesn't actually end because it's one of these open-ended ones, and that's pretty much it. And that's the general gist of the game. But like I say, it's just not explained to you how you go about it, and it's not explained to you why your buildings aren't being built, and why your workers won't go in the buildings, and why the workers won't pick up tools, and why your military, even though there's spears and weaponry available to them, won't actually go and get the damn weapons. It's not explained at all, which is shocking in my opinion. Very, very bad. Where you shouldn't have the player floundering around, because a lot of people are going to give up on your game because they simply don't know what they're doing, and a lot of people won't put the effort in to actually go and find out externally how to play the game from community forums and such. Turning to some of the game's basics, the graphics look a lot better still. If you go on various websites to have a look at screenshots for this game, the graphics look gorgeous on the screenshots, but in reality they're not that detailed, they're not that great, to be honest with you. They're good enough, they're passable, but for this generation they're severely lacking, but are adequate for the job really. You can see what everything is, but there's no bells and whistles on it, if you get what I mean. Similar with the sound, there's a nice rousing Nordic Viking themed soundtrack going on there. But there's one thing that's criminally missing from this, which makes the game feel very, very soulless. There's no ambient sounds. There's no ambient sounds of your village. Your village doesn't feel alive because there's no sound of woodcutters cutting wood. There's no sounds of sawmills cutting through wood and making boards. There's no mining noises. There's no wind. There's no breeze. There's no ocean sounds. There's no birds tweeting. There's no rabbits, whatever noise a rabbit makes. There's just no sound of your army, your military barracks. No sound of them practicing or swords clashing and things such as that. There's just no ambient sounds at all, and it just feels a very, very odd, empty experience. It doesn't feel like your community, which you're trying to make thrive, is actually alive, which to me is a very simple thing they could have done and rectified, and it should be there and would have lifted the game up really, because it feels like the village is then living. One of the things I like to do on games such as this, like on Settlers for example, you could click on an individual member and actually watch them go about their daily business. So when they pass various buildings, you heard that building's sound. You heard pass a farm, you heard cows mewing and chickens clucking. This nothing, it's just deathly silent, which is bizarre, odd and peculiar, and it makes the game feel peculiar as well. So overall then, is Valhalla Hills Definitive Edition any fun? Well, yes it is. Which you might be surprised to hear me say. Once you've actually learned how to play it through going going externally to find out how to play the game, it is actually quite fun and interesting to play. When you learn how the communities work and the buildings link together, you can develop some kind of rudimentary tactics on how to build up a community fit to battle the enemies as they come through the portal, so you can transcend. It is fun, but it's just missing loads and loads of basic features I would expect from a title which is charging $29.99 from. I know I keep mentioning it, but the lack of a tutorial of any kind of how the gameplay mechanics actually work and how buildings interact with one another, that's just bizarre. It's just criminal, because everybody is going to get stuck floundering around thinking, why aren't my buildings working, or why aren't my people picking up tools, weapons, etc. Why aren't they feeding themselves? Why aren't they sleeping in the beds that I've just provided for them? People are going to be scratching their heads wondering that, and you shouldn't have to go searching externally to find that information out. That should be provided in game, teaching you how to play it. Again, graphics basic, ambient sounds bizarrely missing. It just lacks refinement for a product that is charging $29.99 from. So whilst yes, it is enjoyable once you figure out how to play the game, it's just missing the bells and whistles needed to charge that price, in my opinion. So whilst I'm going to give it a good mark of 3 out of 5, it is definitely one to wait for a sale or to rent, because there is going to be a retail version of this available as well. If it drops down to $14.99, I would say purchase this game straight away, but at its current price point, it's definitely a wait for a sale or a rental. So I hope you enjoyed that review, guys. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next review.